Lesson 3-5, Solving Two-Step Equations. The main goal of this lesson is to be able to solve two-step equations, and the one vocabulary word for this lesson is two-step equation. So a two-step equation is an equation that has two steps to it. All the equations that I've solved in the previous lessons, in lesson 3.2 and 3.3, were one-step equations. But now we have to do two steps in order to get to our answer. And again, I have the three problem-solving questions to ask yourself right here. But I've added something new to it right here. But not with it, and I made it orange. And I'll explain in a moment why I made it orange. But they're the exact same three questions. So when you have a two-step equation, you're going to go through the questions once, and then you're going to go through them again a second time for the second step. The first time you're going to ask yourself the question but not with it, and the second time you're not going to ask yourself that part of the question. So let's get started and you'll see how these questions work. Remember, just like with the doing the one-step equations, the equations that had addition, subtraction, and multiplication in them, this is just one way to go about solving it. I found that these questions have been the most successful with students, so that's why I'm using them again here. There are lots of other ways to go about solving them and questions to ask yourself as you work through them, but these are the ones that I found to be most successful. So here's the first question. What numbers on the same side of the equal sign as the variable but not with it? And the but not with it means not right next to it. See how the variable is right next to the 2? When we ask ourselves the question the first time with the but not with it, we're looking for the number that's on the same side as the equal sign but not right next to it. So the first time through, we're not looking for the 2, we're looking for the 3 because it's on the same side as the equal sign but it's not right next to it. So the answer to question number 1 is 3. Second question is, what operation is going on with that number and what's the opposite of it? Remember, you look in front of it to figure out what operation is going on. We're adding, and the opposite of addition is subtraction. The third question, what number are you going to add, subtract, multiply, or divide from both sides? We're going to subtract, because that's what we got here, 3, because that's what we got here, from both sides. It's really important when we're doing two-step equations to really make sure that you get everything lined up where it's supposed to be. So I want to subtract 3 from the adding 3 right here, and I want to subtract 3 from the 9 over on that side of the equal sign. So adding 3 and subtracting 3 end up canceling out. So the only thing that you're left with on this side of the equal sign is the 2x. And we have equals 9 minus 3 is 6. Now I'm going to go through and I'm going to ask myself these questions the second time through. Notice that this is the kind of question that we were working on in the last few lessons. Now we're down to a one-step equation. So I'm going to ask myself this first question, but I'm not going to ask myself the orange part. What number is on the same side as the equal sign as the variable? 2. What operation is going on with that number and what's the opposite of it? Well, since there isn't any operation sign going on that I can see between the 2 and the x, that means that it's multiplication. And the opposite of multiplication is division. And the final question, what number are you going to add, subtract, or multiply, or divide from both sides? I'm going to divide both sides by 2. Remember, we showed division by making a fraction bar, which also represents division. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2. 2 divided by 2 cancels out. We're just left with the x equals 6 divided by 2 is 3. And if we wanted to go back and check that, anywhere I saw x up here in the original equation, I can put 3. So that means we'd have 2 times 3 plus 3 equals 9. Order of operations says you're going to do the multiplication first, so 2 times 3 is 6. And I'm going to bring everything else down. 6 plus 3 is 9, and I'm going to bring everything else down. And this is a true equation. 9 does equal 9. So that means that the answer that we got right here, x equals 3, is the right answer for this equation. Let's give it a try another time. So here's our equation. 3x plus 2 equals 23. I know this is a two-step equation because I see multiplication here and I see addition here, so there's two different operations going on. So I'm going to ask myself, what number is on the same side of the equal sign as the variable, but not with it? Remember, not right next to it. The 3 is right next to the x, so that's not the one I'm looking for. I'm looking for the 2. It's on the same side as the equal sign, but it's not right next to it. What operation is going on with that number and what's its opposite? I look in front of the 2. I see that we're adding, and the opposite of adding is subtracting. What number are you going to add, subtract, or multiply, or divide from both sides? You're going to end up subtracting 2 from both sides. Remember, we're going to line these up really well. These end up canceling out because adding 2 and subtracting 2, you get 0. So we're left with 3x equals 23 minus 2 is 21. Now we're going to go back through and we're going to ask ourselves these same questions, but this time I'm not going to ask myself this question in orange. What number is on the same side as the equal sign as the variable? The 3 is on the same side. What operation is going on with that number and what's its opposite? Well, since there isn't any operation sign between the 3 and the x here, that means there's multiplication, and the opposite of multiplication is division. What number are you going to add, subtract, multiply, or divide from both sides? You're going to divide both sides by 3. Remember, you show division with a fraction bar. Whenever you do one side of the equal sign, you have to do the other. 3 divided by 3 cancels out, and you're just left with x equals 21 divided by 3 is 7. And if we wanted to go back through and check it, anywhere you see x, you can put 7 in this equation up here. So 3 times 7 plus 2 equals 23. Order of operations says you're going to multiply before you before you add. So 3 times 7 is 21 plus 2 equals 23. 21 plus 2 is 23. Bring everything else down. 23 is equal to 23. That's a true statement. So here is our answer. X equals 7. Let's try another one. We know this is a two-step problem because I see multiplication here and I see subtraction going on here. So I'm going to ask myself the orange question the first time through. What number is on the same side of the equal sign as the variable but not with it? The negative 2 is right next to the variable, so that's not the number I want. I see a 7. That's on the same side as the equal sign, but it's not right next to it. What operation is going on with the number and what is its opposite? Well, I look in front of the 7 and I see that we're subtracting, and the opposite of subtraction is addition. What number are you going to add, subtract, multiply, or divide from both sides? That means we're going to add 7 to both sides. Remember to make sure to line them up. So subtracting 7 and adding 7, that gets you 0, so those two are canceled out. We're just left with the minus 2y on the left side of the equal sign, and 3 plus 7 is 10. Now I'm going to go back through and I'm going to ask myself these questions again, but I'm not going to ask myself the but not with it part. What number is on the same side of the equal sign as the variable? The negative 2 is. What operation is going on with that number and what is its opposite? Well, the operation that's going on between the negative 2 and the y is multiplication because I don't see a sign there, and the opposite of multiplication is division. What number are you going to add, subtract, multiply, or divide from both sides? I'm going to divide negative 2. Remember, whatever you do to one side, you're going to do to the other. These two cancel out, so you're just left with y equals 10 divided by negative 2. Since we're dividing and we have opposite signs, that means that our answer is going to be negative because we have a positive 10 here and a negative 2 here, so our signs are opposite. And 10 divided by negative 2 is negative 5. Again, if we want to go through and check it, anywhere we see y, we can put negative 5. So negative 2 times negative 5 minus 7 equals 3. We're going to multiply before we subtract. Negative 2 times negative 5 is positive 10 because when we have the same signs, we have two negative signs here. When you multiply those together, you're going to get a positive answer. And 2 times 5 is 10. And I'm going to bring everything else down that we haven't used yet. Now I'm going to subtract. 10 minus 7 is 3. And I'm going to bring down everything else. This is a true equation. 3 does equal 3. So that means this over here must be our answer. One last one for today. We know that this is a two-step problem because I see multiplication here and I see addition going on here. So that means the first time through I'm going to ask myself this orange part of the question. What number is on the same side of the equal sign as the variable but not with it? The 4 is, because the 5 is right next to the r, but the 4 is also on the same side of the equal sign, but it's not right next to it. What operation is going on with that number and what is its opposite? Well, this gets a little tricky because we see the plus sign, but it's actually after it, but it still does apply to the 4. So the opposite of adding 4 would be to subtract 4. So what number are you going to add, subtract, multiply, or divide from both sides? We're going to subtract 4 from both sides. These two are canceled out, so now I'm left with the 5r. Now we have negative 11 minus 4. Remember, we want to change all our subtraction to addition by doing same, add, opposite. So we're going to make the negative 11 the same. I'm going to change my subtraction to addition, and I'm going to change my positive 4 to negative 4. Negative 11 plus negative 4 is negative 15. So I'm going to bring the negative 15 down here. Now I'm going to go through these 3 questions again, but this time I'm not going to ask myself the orange part. What number is on the same side as the equal sign as the variable? The 5 is on the same side. What operation is going on with that number and what's the opposite of it? Since there's no operation sign between these two, that means that we're multiplying, and the opposite of multiplying is to divide. What number are you going to add, subtract, multiply, or divide from both sides? We're going to divide 5 from both sides. So I'm going to use a fraction bar to represent my division. These two 5's cancel out. We're just left with the r equals negative 15 divided by 5. We have opposite signs, a negative and a positive, so that means our answer is going to be negative. And negative 15 divided by 5 is going to be negative 3. And again, if we want to go through and check this, anywhere we see r, we can put a negative 3 in this equation up here. So we have 4 plus 5 times negative 3 equals negative 11. Order of operations says that we'll multiply before we add. So 5 times negative 3 is negative 15. We're going to bring everything else down that we haven't used. 4 plus negative 15 is negative 11. And negative 11 is equal to negative 11. That's a true statement. So that means that this right here is the answer to the equation. So in order to solve two-step equations, you're going to ask yourself the same 3 questions as you do when you solve one-step equations, but you're going to add to the first question this but not with it. And you're going to work yourself through these 3 questions 2 times. Again, this is one way to go about solving this two-step equations. There are other methods, but this is the one that I found to be most successful with students.